The man lived a life that seemed quiet, almost ordinary. From the outside, no one would ever guess the storm that lay behind his calm eyes or the strength hidden beneath his gentle demeanor. His house sat neatly on a small street where neighbors waved when they passed and children played safely in their yards. It was the kind of place where people felt they belonged, where the rhythm of daily life moved slowly, and where everyone thought they knew each other. He moved through the neighborhood with the same quiet confidence he carried in his own home, nodding at familiar faces, keeping conversations polite but brief. He worked a regular job, one that required attention to detail and patience, skills he had perfected long before in another life. At work, he was methodical and precise, yet unassuming. His coworkers liked him, though they rarely knew him deeply. They saw a man who kept his space tidy, arrived early, and never missed deadlines. To them, he was reliable, perhaps even ordinary. They did not know of the long nights he had spent in remote locations, training in ways that tested both mind and body, or of the missions where every decision could mean life or death. His home reflected his personality. Everything had its place. The floors were clean, the furniture arranged just so, and the garden outside carefully tended. He took pride in order, but not for show. He lived this way because it gave him a sense of control and calm. Every morning he followed the same routine. He woke early, made himself a cup of coffee, and walked through his home with a careful eye, checking that everything was in order. He ran through simple exercises, stretches that kept his body in peak condition, and then he prepared for his day. To an outsider, it looked like the habits of a man who simply liked discipline. But it was much more than that. It was a way to stay ready for anything, even things he never spoke of. The neighborhood, however, was changing. There had been whispers lately about certain people in the area who did not welcome everyone equally. Some neighbors muttered their concerns in private conversations. Tension had been building quietly, like a storm cloud gathering at the edge of the horizon. He noticed it too, but he did not worry. He had faced far worse. Life had taught him patience and caution, and he had learned never to underestimate threats. Even on days when he felt completely at ease, he kept an awareness that many ignored. He noticed the subtle signs, the way some cars lingered too long on the street, the unfamiliar faces that stared a little too intently. He observed these things without fear, analyzing, calculating, always prepared. His mind was trained to anticipate danger, even if it had not yet arrived. Yet despite this, he lived among his neighbors without making them uneasy. He smiled when he passed them, helped carry groceries, and occasionally offered a friendly greeting. He was careful to be part of the community while maintaining his privacy. That evening, the air felt heavier than usual. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the street. He went through his routine without concern. The mailbox was checked, bills and letters sorted. He prepared dinner and sat down at the small table in his kitchen, listening to the quiet hum of his refrigerator and the distant sound of children laughing in the yard. He savored these ordinary moments because he knew life could change in an instant, and he understood the value of calm. As night fell, he went through his final checks. Doors were locked, windows secured, lights set to give the illusion of presence even when he moved from room to room. He did not do this because he feared his neighbors or expected trouble, but because vigilance had been instilled in him over years of training. It was habit now, second nature, part of who he was. By the time he finished, the house was as it should be, orderly, quiet, and secure. Outside, unknown to him, a group of men were planning something cruel. They had watched the neighborhood for weeks, filled with misguided anger and blind hatred. They believed they could intimidate, damage, and frighten anyone they chose, assuming that this man, like any other, would be an easy target. They did not know him at all. They did not understand that beneath the calm exterior lay skills honed through years of the most intense training imaginable. Skills that few could match and none would expect from someone who walked quietly among them each day. He went about his evening unaware of the danger gathering just beyond his front gate. He read a book in the living room, a small lamp casting a warm glow over the pages, and occasionally glanced out the window at the peaceful street. The world seemed normal, tranquil even. In moments like these, he allowed himself to breathe a little easier, to forget, if only briefly, that life had tested him in unimaginable ways before. He had spent years learning discipline, control, and restraint. Those lessons had taught him more than survival. They had taught him how to remain calm when chaos arrived, how to think clearly when others panicked, and how to act decisively when action was necessary. In his mind, danger was never a surprise. It was simply another situation to be assessed, understood, and managed. These were the habits of a Navy SEAL, though no one in the neighborhood suspected it. They only saw the quiet man who tended his garden, answered politely when greeted, and kept to himself. As the night deepened, he prepared for bed with the same careful attention he brought to everything else. He locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and moved through each room, scanning for anything unusual. The house was secure, and he allowed himself a brief moment of peace. Outside, the air was still, the street quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. He did not hear the footsteps, did not see the shadows slipping silently along the edges of the property. The danger was close, but for now it had not yet crossed the threshold. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he reflected on life's unpredictability. He thought of his past missions, the experiences that had shaped him, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. Every decision, every risk had taught him to value preparation, calm, and awareness. He understood human behavior deeply, could read intentions almost instinctively, and had mastered the art of patience. Yet for all that, he lived quietly now, choosing a simple life, appreciating the small joys that often went unnoticed. He did not consider himself extraordinary. He simply understood his capabilities and knew how to control them. And he had chosen wisely not to flaunt them. Life in the neighborhood was ordinary, and he wanted it to remain so. He enjoyed the peaceful rhythm, the routine, the sense that for now nothing catastrophic would interrupt the flow of daily life. It was a rare kind of peace, fragile and precious, one that could be shattered if he ever let his guard down. But as he drifted into sleep, he could not know that the calm of his home was about to be broken. Outside, the men plotting to raid his house were moving closer, unaware of the extraordinary danger they were about to encounter. They were confident, cruel, and foolish, believing that intimidation alone would suffice. They had no idea that they were about to wake the most dangerous person in the neighborhood, a man whose calm exterior hid lethal skill, intelligence, and unwavering control. For now, the house was still. The lights glowed softly, casting gentle shadows, and the quiet of the street seemed unbroken. Inside, he slept soundly, unaware of the chaos approaching, trusting in his routine and instincts, though even he could not foresee the exact moment when everything would change. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest hint of the storm that was about to arrive. And so the night passed, silently, but with a tension that only he, if he were awake, might have sensed. The ordinary life he cherished was about to collide with a danger, unlike any he had allowed so close to him before. Yet even in the calm, the man remained ready, even unknowingly, for the challenge that would soon awaken every skill, every lesson, and every experience he had carried through his extraordinary life. The night was dark, heavier than usual, and the quiet of the street was broken only by distant sounds of tires on asphalt and the occasional bark of a dog. Inside his house, the man slept peacefully, unaware of the eyes watching him from the shadows outside. He had no reason to suspect that danger was so close, that the sense of calm he cherished was about to be shattered. The intruders were patient, moving silently, testing the fences, checking the doors, their confidence built on ignorance and arrogance. They thought this was an easy target, someone who would be scared, someone who could be intimidated with threats and destruction. They had no idea what they were walking into. The gang had planned carefully. They had driven around the neighborhood for weeks, studying patterns, noting when lights went on or off, when people left and returned. They believed they had found weakness, a home that could be raided without consequence. The leader whispered instructions to the others, gestures sharp and commanding, assuming control over a situation they thought was simple. Every member was fueled by hate, by assumptions that they were stronger and smarter than their intended victim. They did not pause to question their own arrogance, nor did they consider the possibility that they were dealing with someone far more dangerous than they could imagine. Inside the house, the man was still asleep. He dreamed lightly, the calm rhythm of his breathing filling the quiet rooms. Years of discipline had trained him to sense disturbances even in rest, but tonight he allowed himself to relax. Every sound outside, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant hum of a car, went unnoticed because it was part of the natural rhythm he had grown accustomed to. He was unaware of the approaching danger, and that made him appear ordinary, just another neighbor in a calm, safe community. But beneath the surface, instincts ran deep, ready to be awakened at the first sign of threat. The gang moved closer, crouching low, scanning the property for entry points. They avoided the front, knowing it was more visible, and approached from the side and back. One of them tried the back door and found it locked. They muttered curses under their breath, their confidence undiminished by the challenge. They assumed it would only take a few moments to force their way inside. In their eyes, they were in control. They did not know that they were in the territory of someone who had mastered every form of entry and exit, someone who had spent years training to anticipate intrusion, someone who could remain calm in chaos while neutralizing threats with precision. The first glass window they tried did not budge. Frustration grew, but they did not retreat. They whispered, planning to smash it quietly, thinking it would alert no one. They had no idea that the man inside had already noticed unusual sounds hours before, had already adjusted his awareness slightly, and that his mind was preparing for potential action even in sleep. Years of experience had made him sensitive to small anomalies, and while he slept, his subconscious registered the faintest disturbances. The tiny scrape of shoes on pavement, the shifting of weight against a fence, the quiet chatter of men too confident for their own good. The first crash came suddenly. A window shattered, glass scattering across the floor, a loud enough sound to wake anyone unprepared. The man stirred immediately, eyes snapping open, heart calm, mind already calculating. He did not panic. He did not scream. He simply assessed. Every detail registered: the sound of the broken glass, the pattern of movement outside, the number of intruders likely involved. In that moment, he moved instinctively to a safe position, a spot he had prepared in advance in case of such an emergency. His body moved with the confidence of a trained professional, silent and deliberate. The gang entered through the broken window, believing they were finally in control. Their voices were low but aggressive, filled with threats. They began overturning furniture, rifling through drawers, searching for valuables and trying to assert dominance. Their arrogance was complete. They laughed, mocked, and called out, not knowing that the man had already positioned himself in a place where he could observe, where he could act, and where every movement of theirs was visible to him. They did not see the calm in his eyes when he emerged from the shadows. They did not sense the patience that ran through him, the readiness to respond with precision, the careful consideration of every step. As they moved through the house, one of them kicked a chair, sending it crashing to the floor. The sound was harsh, jarring, yet the man did not flinch. He watched, noting the location of each intruder, the way they carried themselves and their mistakes. Small mistakes, insignificant to an untrained eye, but critical to someone like him. He waited for the perfect moment, for the right opportunity to act. Every second that passed, he learned more about them. Their fear, even hidden, their lack of awareness, their overconfidence. They were untrained, impulsive, and that was their weakness. The gang began to argue among themselves, one questioning whether they should continue, another insisting on finding valuables. Their voices grew louder, more chaotic. The man recognized the opening he needed. He knew that in situations like these, patience was the greatest weapon. He did not rush. He did not act out of anger. His calm control was far more dangerous than their noisy aggression. He began to move silently, each step deliberate, each movement calculated. He positioned himself to gain maximum advantage, knowing exactly how to use the environment around him, the furniture, the shadows, the narrow hallways. One of the intruders moved toward the living room where the man had left a light on, signaling an opportunity. The man used the element of surprise, not with brute force, but with strategic control. A single maneuver, precise and unexpected, disarmed the intruder before he could react fully. The others froze, unsure of what had happened, their overconfidence faltering. They were about to realize, painfully, that they had made a critical error in judgment. They had underestimated the very person they had come to intimidate. As the realization set in, fear began to replace their arrogance. They looked around, suddenly aware that they were no longer in control. The man did not speak at first. He let the silence grow, letting it press down on them, unrelenting. His calm presence was more terrifying than any threat they could have imagined. They moved clumsily, trying to regroup, to plan, but he anticipated every motion. Every small step they took was countered with precision. their mistakes magnified by their lack of discipline and his mastery of control. Through all of this, the man remained methodical. He did not attack recklessly, and he did not allow anger to guide him. His training had taught him restraint, to neutralize threats without unnecessary harm. He knew the difference between intimidation and destruction, and he operated with this knowledge. The intruders, on the other hand, were driven only by their impulses and hate. Their plan had failed before it truly began, and yet they still did not understand why. The room felt tense, the air thick with fear and uncertainty. The man's eyes remained calm, his breathing steady. Every movement of his body, every thought was directed toward maintaining control and ensuring that the threat would end decisively and safely. He began to isolate the intruders, separating them through careful maneuvers, guiding them without them realizing it. It was not brute strength that gave him the advantage, it was skill, experience, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. As the night continued, the intruders became more desperate, their plans unraveling with every passing moment. They were trapped in a situation they had not anticipated, and the man was fully aware of their fear. Yet he did not gloat and he did not lose his focus. He understood that this moment required patience, clarity, and precision. He moved quietly, observing, planning his next steps with the same care he had used in every aspect of his disciplined life. By the end of the night, the intruders' confidence was gone. They realized too late that they had underestimated him. They had expected fear and submission, but they found strategy, control, and mastery. The house, once a place of peace and routine, had become a controlled environment where chaos was managed with quiet authority. The man had turned the situation on its head, demonstrating not only his skill but his ability to remain composed, human, and deliberate even when surrounded by danger. The first raid, which had begun with arrogance and ignorance, ended with the intruders retreating, confused, beaten not by brute force alone but by the controlled, precise actions of a man who had lived through far greater challenges. Outside, the neighborhood remained quiet, unaware of the confrontation that had taken place within one of its homes. Inside, the man returned to his calm routine, checking every corner, ensuring security and restoring order. The night's events had tested him, but he had prevailed, his patience, awareness, and discipline keeping both himself and his home safe. The city outside continued unaware, the streetlights flickering softly, children's dreams untouched by the chaos that had unfolded nearby. The man, though still appearing ordinary, had once again proven that calm, preparation, and mastery of self were far more powerful than the aggression of those who acted without thought. He returned to his nightly routine, ready to rest once more, knowing that the world could change in an instant, but also knowing that he would always be ready. The man woke with a start, not from panic but from instinct. Every nerve in his body was alert, every sense sharpened. His eyes scanned the room immediately, noticing details others might miss. A shattered window, a faint scuff on the floor, the subtle movement of shadows across the walls. He was calm, but he understood the danger clearly. Someone had invaded his home, someone foolish enough to think it was easy to intimidate him. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the familiar rush of focus that always came in these situations. A combination of awareness, precision, and readiness that had been honed over years of training. He moved silently, his footsteps making no sound on the floor. Every motion was deliberate, controlled, and purposeful. He had faced threats before, real ones where hesitation could mean death. This situation, while different in its immediacy, demanded the same clarity of mind. The house that had been his safe haven only moments ago was now a place of potential chaos, and he treated it with the care and precision it required. His training kicked in fully, not as a show of strength, but as an instinctual system that guided his body and mind in unison. The intruders had underestimated him, and now their lack of planning was becoming apparent. They moved clumsily through the house, voices low but nervous. Every loud step, every careless motion gave him more information. He observed, calculated, and planned. He did not act rashly because he knew the importance of timing. He waited for the moment when he could act with maximum advantage and minimum risk. He was not reckless. He was patient. The difference between survival and failure had been taught to him in extreme conditions, and he applied those lessons now with quiet precision. As he moved through the rooms, he noticed the intruders' mistakes immediately. One of them had left a door partially open, a path that could be used to separate them. Another had knocked over a small object, a sound that indicated nervousness, hesitation, and lack of awareness. To the man, these details were invaluable. They told him exactly where each person was, how they were thinking, and how he could manipulate the situation without exposing himself unnecessarily. This was not chaos to him. It was information, a map of the enemy created by their own carelessness. He began to act, slowly at first, making sure every movement was silent and deliberate. He positioned himself in a hallway that allowed him to see two of the intruders at once without being seen. He knew the house intimately. He had planned for emergency situations before, knowing that control came from understanding one's environment completely. Every corner, every piece of furniture, every shadow was part of his strategy. He was not moving randomly. He was orchestrating the situation with patience and skill that came naturally to him. One of the intruders moved closer, unaware of the man's position. He stumbled over a rug, barely catching himself, and the sound was enough to confirm his exact location. The man adjusted slightly, making himself ready for immediate action. He did not strike yet. He allowed the intruder's overconfidence and carelessness to build the perfect opportunity. Every second counted. Every movement was deliberate. He was calm, steady, and completely in control. The intruders were beginning to sense that something was wrong. Their voices grew more anxious, and one whispered a warning to the others. Their confidence was fading, replaced by uncertainty and fear, though they did not yet know the source. The man remained hidden, his presence almost ghostly. He did not speak, did not make sudden noises. He allowed their own panic to increase, knowing that fear caused mistakes, and mistakes were advantages. He began isolating the intruders subtly. One by one, he guided them into positions where they could be neutralized safely. He moved silently, using shadows and walls to his advantage. He had trained for situations like this countless times, but in this moment, training became instinct. His mind moved faster than theirs, predicting their movements before they made them, adjusting to each small change, each unplanned stumble. The house, once a place of calm and routine, was now a controlled environment where he held every advantage. One intruder tried to grab a chair, intending to intimidate or strike. The man anticipated it before the action was completed. A single, precise movement disarmed him, leaving him unable to act. The others froze at the sight, their arrogance evaporating as fear replaced it. They had assumed this would be simple, but they were learning the hard way that they were facing someone extraordinary. The calm, ordinary man they had thought was weak was anything but. The man did not act out of anger. He did not need to. His focus was on control and resolution. He moved from room to room with efficiency, ensuring that each intruder was isolated and contained. Every step was measured, deliberate, and silent. He did not shout, did not make threats. His presence alone was enough to unsettle them, to break their composure. Fear grew with each passing moment, making their movements slower, more hesitant, and increasingly predictable. Through all of this, the man maintained a clear plan. He was aware of his surroundings, of the intruders' positions, and of how to use the environment to his advantage. He could have acted violently, but he did not need to. Restraint was part of his power. He knew how to neutralize threats effectively without unnecessary harm. His training had taught him discipline and morality under extreme pressure. He understood that the most dangerous person is not always the one who strikes first, but the one who acts with intelligence, patience, and precision. One by one, the intruders began to panic. Their movements became erratic. Their coordination fell apart. They realized they were no longer in control. The man's calm presence dominated the situation, making every action they took a mistake. They tried to communicate, to regroup, but he anticipated every step. His awareness was total, his control absolute. In the chaos they created, he moved with order, efficiency, and calculated patience. A single misstep from one of the intruders created a domino effect. A chair tipped, a foot slipped, and suddenly they were no longer confident, no longer dominant. The man took advantage of each small opportunity, guiding them toward positions where they could be easily contained. He used his knowledge of the house, his understanding of human behavior, and his experience with high-pressure situations to gain the advantage. The intruders, meanwhile, were trapped in their own fear and confusion, unable to comprehend the skill they were facing. He did not act recklessly. Every motion was precise, every decision deliberate. He remained calm, breathing steadily, fully aware of every sound, every shadow, every possibility. The intruders were becoming frantic, their earlier confidence replaced with growing panic. They realized they had miscalculated, that the man they had assumed would be frightened was a force to be reckoned with, yet they could not see him fully, could not understand the depth of his training and experience. They only knew that something was wrong, and that fear was creeping in where arrogance had been. By the middle of the night, the intruders were confused, isolated, and terrified. The man had used every skill at his disposal to control the environment and the situation without exposing himself unnecessarily. He had not attacked violently, yet his influence was clear. They were no longer in control. They were reacting to him, not the other way around. Each mistake they made gave him more information, more opportunity to manage the situation effectively. He remained calm, deliberate, and fully aware of the power dynamic that had shifted entirely in his favor. Finally, as the tension reached its peak, the intruders realized that their assumptions had been completely wrong. They had thought this would be a simple act of intimidation. They had thought that fear would be enough. They had not understood the man they were dealing with, the skill and discipline he possessed, or the calm, calculated way he controlled his environment. They were trapped by their own arrogance, and every movement they made only confirmed the truth. They were no match for someone who had mastered both body and mind in extreme conditions. The man had turned the situation completely, using patience, awareness, and strategic thinking to neutralize a threat that had seemed imminent. The house, once ordinary and peaceful, had become a controlled stage where his skill, calm, and discipline dominated. The intruders, overwhelmed by fear and confusion, had no idea how to respond, only that the calm, ordinary man they had underestimated was anything but ordinary. By the early hours of the morning, the intruders were isolated, confused, and powerless. The man had acted with precision, using his instincts, experience, and training to maintain control at every step. He had not lost his composure. He had not allowed panic to influence his decisions. And though the danger had been real, he had managed it completely, demonstrating that true strength comes from calm, skill, and clarity under pressure. As the first light of dawn began to touch the edges of the sky, the house was once again quiet. The man, though aware of the full extent of the intrusion, remained calm, restoring order and assessing the situation with the same methodical approach he had used throughout the night. He knew that life could change in an instant, and yet he had remained ready, focused, and in control. The intruders, meanwhile, had learned a lesson they would not forget. Appearances can deceive, and underestimating someone can be the gravest mistake of all. By the time the man fully realized the situation, the intruders were disoriented and fearful. Their earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by panic and confusion, but they still refused to leave. Their movements were erratic, unpredictable, and desperate. They had assumed that fear alone would make him submit, that breaking into his home would be enough to scare him into weakness. They were wrong. Every second that passed, he became more aware of their positions, their intentions, and the best ways to control them without unnecessary harm. He moved quietly through the house, ensuring that he was never directly exposed. Each hallway, each corner, each room became a carefully calculated zone of control. He did not rush. He did not attack out of anger. His actions were deliberate, precise, and based entirely on the advantage he had gained through observation. The intruders could sense that something was wrong, but they did not understand what. Their fear grew with every moment of hesitation, every noise, every shadow that seemed to move without explanation. One of the intruders tried to regain control by yelling threats, thinking that aggression would force him out. The man's response was silent and calculated. He moved with ease behind cover, anticipating the intruder's movements and positioning himself to gain complete advantage. With a single controlled motion, he disarmed him using skill and precision rather than brute force. The intruder stumbled, fell to the ground, and froze. The others were watching, and their panic escalated as they realized that their victim was anything but ordinary. The man's focus was complete. He had trained for scenarios far more dangerous than this, where every movement could be life or death. He relied not on anger, but on awareness, patience, and precision. The intruders, by contrast, were chaotic, fearful, and untrained. Every mistake they made reinforced his control. He could have acted recklessly, but restraint was part of his power. He understood that true strength was in control, not in unnecessary destruction. Each intruder's movement, each step, was now predictable because fear had taken over. He began to systematically neutralize them, guiding them without their full understanding. One by one, he maneuvered them into positions where they could no longer act effectively. Every step was calculated. He used the layout of the house, the shadows, and even the intruder's own panic to control the situation. They were no longer moving independently. They were reacting to him, and he had complete command over the environment. Each gesture he made was deliberate, meant to guide their actions and prevent them from regrouping. The intruders were beginning to realize, too late, that they had underestimated him completely. They had thought him weak, unaware, and vulnerable, but they were now trapped by their own mistakes. Their fear was evident in their eyes, their voices, and their movements. They tried to communicate with one another to make plans, but their plans fell apart before they could even begin. The man remained calm, patient, and deliberate, fully aware of the fear he had created without ever needing to raise his voice or use excessive force. In one room, two intruders tried to coordinate an attack, thinking that together they might regain control. The man anticipated this and moved silently into a position where he could intervene without being seen. In a single, fluid motion, he disarmed them both, not by brute strength, but by using leverage, timing, and precision. They collapsed to the floor, shocked and terrified, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Their earlier confidence had dissolved completely, replaced by confusion and fear. They realized they had been outmatched at every turn. The remaining intruders attempted to flee through the back of the house, hoping to escape. The man anticipated their movement and blocked their path with calculated positioning. They stumbled over obstacles he had subtly guided into their way, each one a minor trap designed to slow and confuse. Panic overtook reason, and they began to turn on one another, frustrated and scared. The man did not need to intervene physically. His control of the environment and the psychological pressure he applied were enough to keep them trapped. Time seemed to stretch as he maintained control over the chaotic situation. He remained calm, patient and aware of every sound, every shadow, every subtle movement. He did not allow fear or frustration to cloud his judgment. His mind worked like a machine, processing each action and reaction, ensuring that he maintained dominance without causing unnecessary harm. The intruders, by contrast, were frantic, clumsy, and terrified. Every action they took only confirmed his control and highlighted their vulnerability. One of the intruders, driven by desperation, attempted a reckless move, thinking that sheer aggression might change the outcome. The man reacted instantly, intercepting the action with precise timing. The intruder was neutralized without injury, stunned into submission by the speed and accuracy of the intervention. The others were watching, their confidence shattered, their fear now absolute. They realized that they had been dealing not with a man to intimidate, but with someone whose skills and discipline far surpassed their understanding. The man's awareness was complete. He moved silently from room to room, ensuring that each intruder was contained, neutralized, and unable to act without his control. His actions were deliberate and purposeful, guided by skill, experience, and instinct. He did not raise his voice. He did not act out of rage. He allowed the fear of the intruders to do the work for him, using their own panic against them to maintain dominance. The house, once ordinary and peaceful, had become a carefully controlled environment, where he held all the advantage. By the early hours of the morning, the intruders were fully aware that they had made a terrible mistake. Their arrogance had led them into a situation they could not control, and every attempt to regain power only confirmed their failure. The man had not needed to attack violently or recklessly. His calm, deliberate actions, combined with his understanding of human behavior and environmental control, had rendered them powerless. He had neutralized the threat completely without causing unnecessary harm, a testament to his skill, patience, and discipline. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows, the man ensured that the intruders were secure and unable to cause further harm. He assessed the situation carefully, checking every room and every exit. His focus never wavered. He had faced far greater threats in his life, but each situation required the same principles: awareness, patience, control, and precision. The intruders, meanwhile, had been thoroughly subdued. Their plans had failed, their confidence destroyed, and their fear complete. He took a moment to restore order in the house, quietly moving items back into place and checking for any damage that might compromise safety. His calm presence dominated the environment, a stark contrast to the panic and chaos of the intruders. He did not speak to them unnecessarily. His silence and composed movements conveyed far more power than any words could. They realized fully now that they had been outmatched, and that their underestimation of him had been catastrophic. The intruders' fear was total. They no longer attempted to fight, no longer tried to escape. They remained where he had positioned them, fully aware that they were powerless and that their actions had consequences they could not control. The man had demonstrated clearly and decisively that arrogance and ignorance could not overcome skill, patience, and awareness. He had acted without malice, without unnecessary violence, and yet the result was undeniable. They had been neutralized completely and efficiently. As the sun rose, the neighborhood outside remained peaceful and unaware of the events that had unfolded inside the house. The man, despite his extraordinary abilities, maintained the calm appearance of an ordinary resident. He checked the surroundings, ensuring that no threat remained and that his home was secure once more. He returned to his daily routine quietly, methodically, and with the same disciplined care he had always shown. The intruders, meanwhile, were left to reflect on their mistakes. They had believed fear and intimidation would succeed, but they had encountered a man whose skill, patience, and control exceeded their understanding. They realized, too late, that appearances can be deceiving, and that underestimating someone based on what you see on the surface can lead to devastating consequences. Their arrogance had been their downfall, and the man had proven, without unnecessary violence, the power of discipline, awareness, and restraint. By mid-morning, the house was quiet again. The man had returned to his regular life, but he remained alert, aware that danger could arise again at any moment. His actions during the night had been precise, controlled, and effective, a reflection of the training and experience that few could match. The intruders had been defeated, and the house restored to its peaceful state. Yet the lesson was clear. Control, patience, and intelligence could overcome brute force, and calm skill could dominate chaos. The neighborhood continued unaware, the streets quiet, children playing and neighbors going about their routines. Inside, the man continued his careful observations, ensuring security and reflecting briefly on the night's events. He understood that life could be unpredictable, but he also understood that preparation, awareness, and calm action could change outcomes dramatically. The intruders had been neutralized, and the house once again became a place of safety, routine, and ordinary life. Though the extraordinary events of the night had proven just how extraordinary he truly was. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting warm light across the living room, where the man had spent the previous night managing chaos with careful precision. Outside, the neighborhood appeared unchanged, peaceful as always, unaware of the drama that had unfolded behind closed doors. The intruders had been neutralized, and the house was secure once again, yet the calm of the day carried a weight of quiet victory. The man moved through his home methodically, restoring order, checking locks, and making sure everything was as it should be. Despite the extraordinary events of the night, he remained calm, composed, and human. There was no celebration, no rush of pride. He knew the danger had been real, but he also understood the importance of returning life to normal. The intruders had been subdued without unnecessary harm, and that was the result he valued most. He had acted decisively, but always with discipline, using his experience and training to protect his home and himself while preserving life. Once the immediate danger was over, he turned his attention to communication. The authorities needed to know what had happened. He contacted local law enforcement, describing the situation calmly and accurately. He did not embellish or dramatize. He provided clear information, allowing the police to respond effectively. Within minutes, officers arrived and the intruders were apprehended. They were shocked, disoriented, and completely aware that their actions had failed spectacularly. The man's composure impressed the officers, though they still had no idea of the full scope of his capabilities. Neighbors began to gather cautiously outside, drawn by the sound of sirens and the unusual activity on the street. Some whispered in concern, others observed quietly. When they saw the man walking calmly outside, speaking politely to the authorities, they could not reconcile the peaceful, ordinary neighbor they knew with the events that had just occurred inside his home. He smiled briefly, nodding to those who recognized him, maintaining the same calm and friendly demeanor he had always shown. There was no arrogance in him, only quiet confidence. As the officers secured the intruders, they discovered the extent of the gang's plans. They had intended to intimidate, destroy, and perhaps even harm, believing they were targeting someone weak and unprepared. Instead, they had encountered a man whose life experience, training, and discipline made them powerless. The authorities were astonished not only at the intruder's failure, but also at the efficiency and calm with which the man had handled the entire situation. His ability to control chaos, isolate threats, and neutralize danger without unnecessary violence was beyond what most could imagine. After the intruders were taken away, the man returned to his home, walking through each room to ensure nothing had been overlooked. The house bore the marks of the intrusion, yet it was not damaged beyond repair. He methodically assessed every area, noting where furniture had shifted, where a window had been broken, and what needed to be restored. He moved with the same precision and calm as he had during the confrontation, maintaining control even in the aftermath. To him, order was not just a preference, it was a way to regain normalcy after chaos. The day unfolded slowly. The neighborhood seemed unaware of the danger that had passed, continuing its quiet routines. Children played in yards, neighbors greeted each other, and life moved forward as if nothing had happened. The man observed from his porch, a sense of satisfaction in his calm eyes. He had handled the situation effectively, and now his focus was on ensuring the environment remained safe and secure. There was no boasting, no need to impress anyone. He valued action over recognition, results over praise. As the day progressed, news of the attempted break-in began to spread quietly through the neighborhood. People spoke in hushed tones, expressing shock and curiosity. Some wondered aloud how someone could remain so calm during such a terrifying event. Others speculated about the man's background, realizing that there was more to him than they had ever imagined. The whispers carried a mixture of awe, respect, and disbelief. They could not see the full truth, but even the smallest hints suggested that he was far more capable than appearances revealed. The man, meanwhile, focused on practical matters. Repairs were scheduled for the broken window and minor damage. Security measures were reinforced not out of fear but as precaution. He understood that life was unpredictable, and while he had handled the intruders expertly, vigilance remained necessary. His calm approach continued, each action deliberate, each decision measured. He maintained the same rhythm and discipline that had guided him through the night's chaos, showing that strength is as much about composure as it is about skill. At some point during the day, neighbors approached cautiously, expressing concern and gratitude. They had no idea how close they had come to witnessing a tragedy, and they were astonished at the man's ability to remain composed and protect himself. He spoke simply, modestly, and without exaggeration. He reassured them that the situation had been handled, emphasizing the importance of staying calm, aware, and prepared. His words carried weight because they came from someone who had lived through extreme circumstances and had faced danger countless times before. As the sun began to set, the man reflected quietly on the events. He understood the gravity of the night, yet he also recognized the lessons it offered. He had faced a threat that relied on ignorance, hate, and arrogance, and he had neutralized it with discipline, patience, and skill. The intruder's failure was a reminder of the dangers of underestimating others, of assuming appearances tell the whole story. He had acted with calm, intelligence, and morality, showing that power is most effective when paired with restraint. The authorities, neighbors, and even the local news soon learned the full scope of the situation. When the man's background as a Navy SEAL was revealed, astonishment spread. People who had thought of him as an ordinary neighbor were confronted with the truth. They had been living next to someone extraordinary. His training, experience, and calm in the face of danger had protected them, though they had never known it. The revelation changed their perception, highlighting not only his skill but also his humility. He had never sought recognition, yet his actions earned it naturally. In the days that followed, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Life resumed its quiet rhythm, but respect for the man grew. People spoke of him differently, with a mixture of awe and admiration. They realized that strength is not always loud or visible, that the most extraordinary abilities often exist quietly, beneath ordinary appearances. The man himself did not change. He continued his routines, his calm, measured life, but with the quiet satisfaction that he had protected his home, his life, and those around him. Reflecting on the events, he understood the deeper lessons. Life can be unpredictable, and danger can appear without warning. Yet preparation, awareness, and discipline can make all the difference. He valued calm over panic, patience over impulse, and clarity over confusion. The intruders had relied on arrogance, hate, and ignorance, and their failure underscored the importance of skill, discipline, and human intelligence. He had acted decisively, yet with care, demonstrating that true power lies not in violence but in control and understanding. The man's actions left a lasting impact. Not only had he neutralized a dangerous threat, but he had also shown that courage and intelligence often work quietly, without fanfare. His calm demeanor, disciplined mind, and extraordinary abilities became a source of inspiration for those who learned of them. People began to understand that ordinary appearances can conceal extraordinary skill, and that true strength is measured by composure, awareness, and the ability to act decisively when necessary. As the neighborhood settled back into its routine, the man returned to his life as if nothing had happened. He maintained his daily habits, tending his home, observing the world around him, and appreciating the simple rhythms of life. Yet beneath the ordinary surface, he carried the knowledge that he had faced danger, controlled it, and emerged unshaken. The intruder's failure was a testament not only to his skill, but also to his discipline, calm, and humanity. In the end, the neighborhood remained peaceful, the streets quiet, and the man's life returned to normal. Yet the memory of the night's events lingered, a reminder of what had been avoided and what could have happened. The man, ordinary in appearance but extraordinary in capability, continued his life with quiet confidence. He had protected his home, his life, and those around him. And though few fully understood the depth of his skill, everyone could see the calm assurance with which he lived, a quiet reminder that appearances can deceive, and that true strength often resides in the most unexpected places.